There's a swing that a lot of very serious people believe is the most perfect motion in the history of golf. Tiger Woods said only two players who ever lived truly owned their swing. And one of them wasn't Jack Nicklaus or Arnold Palmer or Tiger himself. It was a pudgy, self-taught Canadian who slept in his car, wore turtlenecks in the summer heat, and was so badly treated by professional golf that he walked away from it at the exact moment he was about to break through. His name was Moe Norman, and the secret to the swing they called perfect is real. It's specific. And I'm going to explain exactly how it worked, but that's only half of this, because the same brain that built the most repeatable swing anyone had ever seen also made his life almost unbearably hard. The perfection and the pain came from the same place, so this is two stories that are really one story. How the swing worked, and what it cost the man who owned it. If you've watched my videos on Ben Hogan's swing secret or Tiger's stinger, you already know the company Moe keeps, because Tiger named him in the same breath as Hogan. Let's start with what made grown professionals stop and stare. Here's the thing, you have to understand first. When Moe Norman set up to the ball, he was already standing in the position most golfers spend their whole lives, trying to reach for a fraction of a second at impact. That's the secret. That's the whole thing. Let me explain what it means. A normal golf swing is what teachers call a two-plane swing. Your arms hang down at address, so the club is on one angle. Then during the swing, to hit the ball with power, everything has to shift up onto a different, steeper angle at impact. So between setup and impact, the club changes planes. It moves. And every one of those moving parts is a chance for something to go wrong, which is why the rest of us hit it fat, thin, left and right, all in the same round. Moe removed the shift entirely. He set up with his arms pushed straight out away from his body, so that the club shaft and his trailing arm formed one single straight line, one plane, pointing right down at the ball. He called it having the fewest moving parts. Gary Player, who saw every great swing of the 20th century, said Moe's swing had fewer moving parts than any he'd ever seen. Because Moe was set up at impact before he ever moved the club, all he had to do was swing back and return to where he already was. He wasn't trying to find the perfect position on the way down. He was already in it. Now, the setup that made this possible looks bizarre, and every piece of it has a purpose. Let me give you the real mechanics, because this is a shot you can actually understand. First, the stance. Very wide, wider than your shoulders, knees barely bent, and he sort of sat down into it. That ultra-wide base killed the lateral movement and the swaying that wrecks the average swing. It made him stable like a tripod. Second, the grip. Moe held the club more in the palm of his lead hand than in the fingers, with thicker grips than normal on longer than normal clubs. That palm grip kept the club face from rotating and flipping through impact, which is exactly what sends your shots left and right. Third, and this is the one that makes people laugh when they first see it, he set the club head down, almost a foot behind the ball at address. Not touching the ball, a foot behind it. Why? Because it forced him into the exact swing path and the exact hands-forward position he wanted to return to. It was a trigger. It set the whole motion in place before it started. Moe put it beautifully. He said, "That's where I arrive so good every time." From 3 feet behind the ball to 3 feet in front of it. And fourth, through the ball, his feet stayed flat on the ground and his arms stayed extended. And there was almost no independent hand action. No violent hip spin, no flip of the wrists, none of the timing-dependent moves the rest of us rely on and pray for. Just a wide, simple, one-plane motion, repeating the same position over and over and over. That's the secret. Set up at impact, remove the shift, remove the moving parts, and repeat it like a machine. And I do mean like a machine. Tiger Woods, describing him, compared him to Iron Byron, the mechanical arm that equipment companies use to test golf balls, and said it was frightening how well Moe hit it. There's a story from a professional named Paul Azinger who watched Moe warming up and said he hit about 50 balls and never moved them more than 10 yards left or right of his target. Sam Snead, one of the greatest players who ever lived, watched him and said it was like watching a machine. In 1995, there's a famous photograph of Fred Couples, Ben Crenshaw, Nick Price, and Nick Faldo, 4 of the best players in the world, standing on a range like school kids, just watching a chubby man in his 60s hit balls. Now, before I go further, I have to be honest with you, because if you go into the comments on any Moe Norman video, there's a war happening, and it's a fair fight, so let's have it. One side says Moe Norman is the most overrated player in history, that the whole thing is a myth. that he never won a major, never won a single event on the PGA Tour, and that a man who could really strike it that perfectly would have the record to prove it. And on the bare facts, they're not entirely wrong. Moe Norman never did win a major championship. He never won on the American Tour. So how can he be the greatest ball striker ever and have almost nothing on the biggest stages? There are two answers, and they're both true. The first answer is the honest one, about his game. He couldn't putt. Jack Nicklaus said it perfectly. He said Moe had $1 million swing and a 10-cent putter. Lee Trevino said that if Moe had putted like he did, or like Tom Watson, Moe would have won every tournament he ever played in. So the picture is exactly right. It just isn't the picture the skeptics think. He wasn't overrated as a ball striker. He was one of the greatest ball strikers who ever lived, and a genuinely poor putter. And in golf, that combination wins you nothing at the very top. The ball striking was never the myth. The putting was the reason, and the second answer is the reason for this whole video. And it isn't about golf at all. Because the record the skeptics are looking at, the one with no majors and no American wins, has an explanation. And the explanation is a tragedy. Let me tell you about the man. Moe Norman was born in Kitchener, Ontario in 1929. When he was about 5 years old, he was sledding with a friend. The sled shot across a road, and Moe was dragged underneath a passing car. He said later that he remembered watching the tire roll past the side of his face. His family couldn't afford to take him to a hospital, and his mother worried for the rest of her life that the accident had changed her son. Whether it was the head injury or something he was simply born with, Moe grew up different. Almost everyone who knew him believed, though he was never formally diagnosed, that he was autistic. People called him the Rain Man of golf. He had an astonishing memory for numbers. He'd memorized more than 400 golf courses, every hole, every yardage. He repeated his sentences twice when something mattered to him. Social situations were painful for him. He couldn't look people in the eye easily. He struggled to make friends, and he found the one place in the world where he made perfect sense: the driving range, alone, with a golf ball that did exactly what he told it to. And here's the thing that the swing and the man have in common. The thing that makes this more than a sad story. The same mind that couldn't handle a cocktail party or a press conference. The mind that needed everything simple and repeatable and free of chaos is the exact mind that could stand on a range for 10 hours and groove the most mechanically perfect, repeatable swing anyone has ever built. His greatest gift and his greatest struggle were the same wiring. He didn't overcome his condition to build that swing. He built that swing because of it. If you're finding this as fascinating as I do, the real stories behind the game's legends, that's exactly what this channel does. So take a second and subscribe, because the part that comes next is the part that should never have happened. In 1959, Moe finally went to play on the American PGA Tour. And he was good enough. At a tournament in New Orleans, he put together 4 strong rounds. He was in the final group on the Sunday. He even led for a stretch, and he finished 4th. He was, by every account, about to become a real force. The next win felt inevitable. And then, after that round, a group of PGA members and officials cornered him in the clubhouse. And instead of congratulating the man who just finished 4th, they gave him what people who were there called a dressing down. They told him his clothes were shabby. They mocked the fact that he carried his own bag to save money. They told him his fast play and his quirks were an embarrassment to the tour, and that he needed to shape up and conform. Moe Norman, a man who was almost certainly autistic, who found human contact agonizing at the best of times, who had just played the best golf of his life, was humiliated by the establishment of his own sport for the crime of being himself. He left. Not just the clubhouse, the tour, the country. He got in his car, drove back to Canada, and he never seriously competed in the United States again, the exact moment he was ready to break through onto the biggest stage in golf. The biggest stage in golf told him he didn't belong, so the record the skeptics point to, the one with no American wins and no majors, isn't proof he wasn't good enough. It's a receipt for how badly he was treated. Back home in Canada, where the money was a fraction of the American tour, Moe built the record that actually is his. 2 Canadian amateur titles, the Canadian PGA Championship twice, the Canadian Seniors PGA Championship an incredible 8 times, 7 of them in a row, 33 course records, 3 rounds of 59, the last one shot when he was 62 years old, 17 holes in one, This is not the record of a range myth. This is a great player, quietly dominating the only place that would have him. And the stories from those years are the stuff of legend, and they're real. There was a betting game he played with another pro named George Knudsen, where putting didn't count. Miss a fairway, you owe $20. Miss a green, $20. But hit the flagstick, the actual pin, and you win $100. Moe's best day, he hit the flagstick 6 times. He'd take bets from the crowd that he could bounce a ball off the face of his driver 100 times. Or that he could hit a shot straight into a spectator's shirt pocket. Once, playing with Sam Snead, Snead told him a creek up ahead couldn't be carried off the tee. So Moe aimed at a little bridge crossing the creek, landed his drive on the bridge and bounced it across to safety. And my favorite, because it tells you everything about how much better than everyone else he actually was. Leading a tournament by 3 shots on the final hole with an easy birdie putt to win comfortably. Moe deliberately putted his ball into a greenside bunker on purpose, just to see if he could handle the pressure of getting up and down. He made the recovery, won the tournament by 2, and then wandered over to the 2 tournament officials who'd watched him do it, the ones standing there with the blood drained from their faces, and asked them what was wrong. But for all of that brilliance, the life stayed hard for a long, long time. For decades, one of the greatest talents the game ever produced lived in something close to poverty. He slept in his car. He lived in a $400 a month motel room and kept his clothes in the trunk. He ate fast food and drank Coca-Cola. And the most he ever made in a single year was about $30,000. He didn't trust banks, so he didn't use them. He wasn't chasing money. He was chasing one thing: the feeling of a perfectly struck golf ball leaving the club exactly the way he'd pictured it. For Moe, that feeling was worth more than any paycheck. That was the whole point. And then, right near the end, golf finally paid him back. In 1995, the story of this strange, brilliant man reached the chief executive of Titleist, one of the biggest companies in golf, a man named Wally Uihlein. Uihlein couldn't believe that a ball striker this legendary had played their golf balls for 40 years and never been given a thing. So he did something remarkable. He offered Moe Norman $5,000 a month for the rest of his life. No obligations. Partly, he said, so they could film that swing and make sure it was never lost. For the first time in his life, in his late 60s, Moe Norman had security. He opened his very first bank account at the age of 67. And the golf world, decades too late, finally started giving him the respect he'd earned. Younger players sought him out. The legends who'd once ignored him now spoke his name with awe. It was, as one person put it, belated, bittersweet applause for a man who never even asked for it. He didn't change a bit. He still wore the old shirts, still showed up at the range, still made touring professionals feel like amateurs, still played fast and never lined up a putt. Moe Norman died in 2004 at 75. No green jacket, no major trophies, no Hollywood ending. But think about what he actually did. A man the world found strange, a man his own sport humiliated and cast out, taught himself with no lessons and no coach to hit a golf ball more perfectly and more repeatably than almost any human being who has ever lived. He built a swing so pure that the greatest players on earth would stop their own practice just to watch him. And he did it not in spite of the mind that made his life so hard, but because of it. So here's the real question, and it's the one they're fighting about in every comment section. What actually makes someone the greatest? Is it the trophies and the majors and the money? Or is it reaching a level of pure mastery, so complete that even the perfect players dropped their jaws, whether the world was clapping or not? Moe Norman never won the things we use to measure greatness. He might have understood it better than any of them. Tell me where you land below. And if you want the real story behind more of the game's forgotten legends, that's what we do here. So stick around.